Coming up. This week, President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, offered a reciprocal scheme in which 18 to 30-year-olds from all EU member states, plus the UK, could live, work or study across Europe for 4 years. An exciting offer which represented at least some compensation for the loss of post-Brexit freedom of movement rights for those then not old enough to vote in the fateful advisory referendum of 2016. An amazing post-Brexit offer from the EU, to which Rishi Sunak responded, free movement within the EU was ended and there are no plans to introduce it, with the Labour Party spokesman responding with the equally ridiculous, no return to the single market, customs union or free movement. The older demographic of 2016 Leave voters and actuarial death rates means that after 8 years, amongst surviving voters, those voting Remain are now in the majority. And that's even before reckoning in the YouGov polling finding that 19% of surviving Leave voters have since changed their minds. Yet the ghosts of dead Leave voters are now depriving our youth of freedom of movement rights from beyond the grave. Surely this can't be right. Stay tuned. Why are you still banging on about a Brexit that happened years ago? They moan. Why don't you respect democracy? They whinge. Well, in the words of the ex-Brexit Secretary David Davis from 2012, a democracy that cannot change its mind ceases to be a democracy. And this democracy definitely has changed its mind. And indeed, changed its mind pretty immediately after Brexit actually happened, as the poll trackers clearly show. 8 years have passed since that fateful referendum, during which time those reaching the age of 18 skew overwhelmingly in favour of rejoining the EU. 70% of 18 to 24-year-olds think leaving the EU was a bad idea. Of the 25 to 42-year-olds, 66% also think we were wrong to leave. Compare that to the wafer-thin 52-48 split back in 2016 that has led to the hardest of hard Brexits, despite the Leave campaign promising that no one was talking about leaving the single market.
Absolutely nobody is talking about threatening our place in the single market.
Yeah, but the very definition of populism, where the majority, however wafer thin, tramples all over the rights and wishes of minorities, as we can see in Orban's Hungary, Erdogan's Turkey, Netanyahu's Israel, and now post-Brexit Britain. British young adults are themselves a minority. And with Sunak's knee-jerk free movement has ended response to the EU's proposal to give back some rights to this minority, the government have been consistent in their approach to this minority, which is to ignore them in the hope that they'll go away. In fact, that's also true of this post-Brexit government's approach to all of us arguing for a closer relationship with the EU. Ignore us. Tell us we're being undemocratic. Tell us that it's no longer relevant. Brexit happened. We won. You lost. Get over it. And other highly intellectual arguments such as those. Because that's the only arguments they have. If the Brexit argument itself had any positives, if it had given us tangible economic benefits or real rather than imagined freedoms, then this Yahoo sucks approach by the Brexitists might have worked, as the vast majority of people would have just moved on. But it hasn't. It's made the standard of living worse for most of us, according to economists, with Goldman Sachs recently measuring a 4 to 8% drag on economic growth due entirely to Brexit, and with the Office for Budget Responsibility recently confirming that their forecast 4% blow to the economy as a result of Brexit is so far proving remarkably accurate. The Brexitists have tried to utilise the camouflage of the Ukraine invasion and the pandemic to convince the public that, to repeat a cliché heard in the right-wing media on a daily basis, it's got nothing to do with Brexit. But the truth is, Brexit in 2024 is by far the biggest drag on growth and living standards, with the average family in both Slovenia and Poland on the verge now of surpassing their British counterparts. That's Brexit for you. My wife is a Polish citizen, and the state of British roads and infrastructure today is very similar to where Poland was when we were there back at the beginning of this century. That situation has now completely reversed, with EU membership propelling Poland into these days being an important and modern European economy, while austerity UK sees its infrastructure deteriorating back to 1970s standards. Imagine what EU membership could do for the UK economy. But back to young people. Zoe Williams wrote a brilliant article in The Guardian this week in passionate defence of the younger generation who, she pointed out, had to live through a pandemic, suffering the harshest possible ratio of personal sacrifice to personal risk. And they did that for the sake of their elders, with their own social lives and educational years being wrecked. They also had 4 years of watching Westminster perving over their Brexit fetish. My words, not Zoe's, with Jacob Rees-Mogg's swivel-eyed European research group on the right of a very right-wing Tory party talking in ever less rational terms about holding all the cards, sunlit uplands, some indefinable notion of sovereignty, and there being no downsides to imposing economic sanctions on our own nation. No wonder that only 1 in 7 18 to 25-year-olds say that they will vote Tory at the next election, and only 1 in 10 of those under 50, who also count as youngsters in my book, obviously. Given those voting intentions, perhaps it's no wonder that the government has been ignoring young people, except when they have the audacity to go on a protest march against the genocide in Palestine or against climate crimes, or when the government hits them with the work-shy stick in the context of a mental illness crisis amongst the young after the ravages of Tory austerity and the pandemic lockdown, or government ministers demonising so-called woke ideas about gender, a plant-based diet, green energy, slavery reparations, and other issues that are of huge importance to young adults, but just a target of ridicule for the current government. In her article, Zoe Williams suggests young people should be offered every known opportunity, since the realisation of their potential is any society's highest goal. The European Commission did not forget, and I guess we have its bureaucrats and pen pushers to thank for that. But of course, with this government, and also it hurts me to say with Starmer's government in waiting, the EU's generous gesture has been slapped away. The timid Starmer is so scared of giving the Tory media a Brexit stick to hit him with, he's shadowing the Tory stance on Brexit, for now at least, while the Tories desperately hope that by banging on about illegal immigration, small boats, and their batshit crazy and eye-wateringly expensive Rwanda immigrant swap policy, the electorate will all become isolationists with an island mentality, moving on from the idea of rejoining the European Union. So far, as the polls show us, if anything, the electorate is moving in entirely the opposite direction. No public poll has shown support for the government's Rwanda policy reaching a majority. The historical trend sees immigration becoming, if anything, a less important issue for the electorate over time, falling from top spot just prior to the referendum to third spot today, with only 37% of people now thinking that immigration is an important issue. By contrast, the clamour to move back towards a closer relationship with the EU increases, at least outside of Westminster. Just this week, respected polling guru and political scientist Sir John Curtice predicted another referendum on Britain's membership of the EU may take place in the next 16 years. I think the 2016 referendum is going to be as unsuccessful as the 1975 one, he said, adding that the timescale of another referendum depends very much on uncertain politics, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happens before 2040. Curtice quoted Ipsos polling, emphasising the importance of demographic changes since 2016 being a major factor in an overwhelming majority of the population now being opposed to Brexit. So it seems it will be the ignored young adults that will be the driving force for another referendum on membership of the EU. And the only defence that Brexitists have to this growing pressure is their promises of a brighter future, shouting about sovereignty, and by the way, the very decision to Brexit proves that we never lost it, and how, in the name of democracy, the establishment, the deep state, the metropolitan elite, and the tofu-eating, Guardian-reading wokerati must respect the 2016 referendum forever and a day, and not argue against it, as the Eurosceptics did for 40 years after the original 1975 referendum. The only arguments that the remaining Brexitists have are infantile jibes in the face of the reality of Brexit causing ever more harm to our society and to our economy. And that's why their Brexit is inevitably doomed.